Welcome to Toxic Family Stories. The number stared back at me like a verdict, $0. I blinked, refreshed the app, refreshed it again, but the balance didn't change. One line in red, loan disbursement, withdrawal, $9,876. My chest tightened as though the digits themselves had wrapped their hands around my throat. Below, more charges scrolled down like a rap sheet. Royal Caribbean, $3,218. Miami Shuttle Service, $210. Paradise Drinks, $86. Line after line, my future itemized into someone else's vacation. And then, near the bottom, the one that sliced deepest, Royal Caribbean Gift Shop, declined. My card, frozen by my own desperate hand, rejecting their greedy swipe. That was the first small step. One quiet click in my banking app. My breath caught, my fingers steady despite the pounding in my head. No rage. No begging. Just strategy. If they thought I was still the daughter who swallowed betrayal whole, they were wrong. My name is Rosalind Wilson, though everyone calls me Rosie. I was 28, and graduation was weeks away, my final semester of nursing school, the semester that was supposed to launch my license, my future. 4 years, I'd worked night shifts, balanced textbooks on breakroom tables, taken out loans I hated, all for this finish line. And now, with one swipe, it was gone. I should have been thinking about pinning ceremonies and job interviews. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table of my childhood home, the snow outside pressing like a blanket against the dark windows, staring at numbers that spelled ruin. The silence in the house was wrong. No tree. No lights. No carols leaking from the living room. Just the hum of the fridge and the ache in my stomach. Then I saw it, taped crooked on the refrigerator door, the thing that turned betrayal into mockery. A yellow sticky note, scrawled in bubbly handwriting, hearts dotting the I's, used your $10,000. Back in 4 days. Take care of Grandma. My hand shook as I ripped it down. Paper crumpled against my palm. $10,000 reduced to emojis. My throat burned. I whispered to the empty kitchen, they didn't. But the phone screen in my other hand proved it, they did. The cane tapping behind me broke the silence. Eleanor, my grandmother, moved slowly into the kitchen, her slippers sliding against linoleum. She didn't look shocked. She didn't even look confused. She set her teacup down, porcelain against wood, and studied me with those eyes that always seemed to see further than anyone wanted. They've shown you who they are, she said. Her voice didn't waver. Calm. Final. Now it's time for consequences. That word. Consequences. I felt it settle in the air like dust after a storm. She didn't reach for me with pity, didn't tell me it would be okay. She named what it was. And suddenly, the silence in the house didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. I slumped into the chair, note crushed in my hand. Grandma, I can't graduate. The tuition deadline's in days. Without it, my voice cracked. It's over. Eleanor tilted her head, lips pressed into a line that was almost a smile but sharper. Not over. Not unless you let it be. She moved to the cabinet and pulled out a metal box, the kind that creaked when opened. Papers stacked inside, neatly bound with clips. She slid one toward me. What is this? I asked, my fingers brushing the edge. An agreement, she said. I'll cover your tuition. But not as family charity. As a loan. With a contract. With interest. I stared at her. You'd make me sign a contract. Her eyes sharpened. Not for me. For them. Love without limits creates monsters, Rosie. They've been feeding on you for years. You want out. Then you draw a line. You document. You enforce. I had never seen her like that. Fragile Eleanor, who neighbors assumed was too soft to raise her voice, now sounded like a general handing down orders. Something inside me, bruised and beaten, flickered back to life. Maybe she was right. Maybe silence wasn't weakness. Maybe silence was calculation. That night, we started. Snow thickened outside, muffling the world. Inside, we called Martin, the locksmith. He had his own history with my father, Debts never repaid, favors taken. He showed up with a bag of tools and a look that told me he didn't need explanations. He replaced bolts, tightened screws, and finally, reprogrammed the keypad lock on the front door. Beep, beep, beep. Each press echoed like a heartbeat monitor in a hospital room, steady and cold. Each new code entered was one more artery cut off from their control. I watched Martin's hands, the way he tightened the final screw. "They won't like this," I said. He grunted. "That's the point." By the time he left, the house was different. It was mine. Ours. Not a free-for-all feeding ground anymore. The next morning, Terry arrived. Eleanor's old friend, a retired lawyer who wore his suits like armor even in retirement. He sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, tapping the fridge note with one finger. "Exhibit A," he muttered. He began drafting repayment agreements, formal language stacked in paragraphs. "You want justice," he said, looking at me over the rims of his glasses. "Paperwork is how you pin people like them down." Beth came later that afternoon. She had been a social worker, her hair streaked with silver, her notepad ready. She documented every detail, her pen scratching across the page like a metronome. Screenshots of the drained account. The note. The cruise bookings. Eleanor insisted we request the flight refund confirmation too, so we had proof of immediate liquidity. Beth nodded approvingly. "Truth isn't loud," she said. "It's documented." I added my own piece to the chain. I called the cruise line, pretending to be my mother. The agent, cheerful and oblivious, confirmed the booking, rattled off charges, dates, cabin numbers. I wrote it all down, my handwriting tight and controlled. Each number was another nail in their coffin. By night, the kitchen table was buried in evidence. Papers stacked high, each one another thread woven into a net. I ran my hand across them and felt steadier. But then the phone lit up. First a buzz, then a second. I didn't answer. When the voicemail came through, my father's voice barked, sharp and furious. "What the hell did you do? Why is the card declined?" Then another, my mother's sobs, her words tumbling fast. "We're humiliated, Rosie, do you understand? I couldn't buy anything at the gift shop, everyone was staring." I watched the phone vibrate on the table until it stilled. I folded laundry, the fabric soft against my hands, and let it ring again. That silence was louder than anything I could have said. "Do you see the shift?" They thought I'd cry, that I'd beg them to explain. Instead, I let the numbers speak. They'd stolen. I'd frozen. They screamed. I recorded. Balance was changing, not through fists, not through shouts, but through the quiet precision of evidence. I looked around that night, the snow glowing against the dark windows, the hum of the fridge behind me. The same fridge that once held family photos now held proof of betrayal. And I thought, this is just the beginning. They still believed the house was theirs, that I was still theirs. They had no idea the locks didn't know them anymore. The door would not open for them again without a price. I didn't sleep the night after the calls. The phone lit up again and again, their numbers flashing like warnings, but I let each one fade to voicemail. By dawn, the kitchen table looked like a war room, evidence fanned out in neat rows, contracts drafted, screenshots printed. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her hands folded on her cane, her eyes steady. "You've done enough crying for them," she said softly. "Now you do the counting." Counting, that was what grounded me. Every withdrawal, every receipt, every overdraft fee stacked like stones on a scale. I stared at the spreadsheet Terry had mocked up, each column marked in sharp black ink. Charges here, repayments there, interest growing in red. For the first time, the math wasn't against me. It was on my side. Do you know that feeling, when numbers stop suffocating you and start breathing for you? That's what it felt like. Martin returned the next day, snow clinging to his boots. He handed me a small envelope. "Keep these codes safe. Don't share them." His voice was low, deliberate. The keypad on the front door blinked with new life, each beep like a pulse. I pressed my fingers to the cold plastic and realized it was more than a lock. It was a gatekeeper, a boundary that had never existed in this family. Later, Beth joined us, her notebook balanced on her knees. She asked questions no one had dared before. How long have they been doing this to you? To Eleanor? Her pen scratched down every detail as Eleanor sighed. Since Harold was old enough to sign his name, she said. They've always believed money is theirs, no matter who earns it. I let it go. That was my mistake. Her words stung because they echoed my own. I had kept that joint account open since I was 18. For 10 years, I let them dip into my life like it was a communal pot. And each time I told myself, family first, I was handing them the knife. The unintended consequence came in the form of silence from their end. After the declined charges, there were no more posts, no more selfies on the beach. Just quiet. I pictured them pacing their cabin, red-faced, humiliated in front of strangers when their cards failed. It gave me a satisfaction I didn't expect, like a debt collector finally knocking on their door. Then came the first email. "Rosie, please don't overreact," my mother wrote. "This is just a misunderstanding. We'll be home soon, and we'll talk about it. Remember, we're family. That's what matters." She signed it with hearts, like the note on the fridge. I showed it to Eleanor. She laughed once, short and dry. "That's not an apology," she said. "That's bait. They'll dangle family until you bite again." She slid the email aside like it was trash. "You don't need their words anymore. You've got paper. That's what counts." Each day we added to the arsenal. Terry filed copies of the contracts. Beth created a timeline, mapping every betrayal in black ink across lined paper. I called the bank and requested statements reaching back years. Watching the transactions pile up felt like someone turning on lights in a dark room. Suddenly all the shadows had names. Sometimes, though, doubt crept in. Lying awake, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if I was becoming like them. Cold, transactional, willing to use paper as a weapon against my own blood. Wasn't family supposed to forgive? Wasn't that what I'd always believed? I whispered this to Eleanor one night, my voice breaking. "What if I'm no better?" She turned to me, her frail hand surprisingly firm as it gripped mine. "The difference is simple. They take without asking. You're demanding accountability. That's not cruelty, Rosie. That's justice." Her words didn't erase the ache, but they steadied me. "Numbers don't lie," she reminded me. And numbers were all I had left. The neighbors began noticing things. Mrs. Garcia waved at me one afternoon, her eyes flicking to the new keypad on the door. She smirked knowingly, as if she'd been waiting years for this shift. I felt exposed but also supported. Gossip traveled fast in Springfield. I didn't need to say a word, the locks spoke for me. By the time New Year's approached, the house no longer felt like a trap. It felt fortified. We cooked small meals, stacked bills neatly in folders, checked locks twice before bed. Operation Consequence wasn't loud, but it pulsed beneath everything we did. Then the final message came from my father, blunt and angry. "You've embarrassed us enough. When we're home, we'll sort this out face to face. Open the door when we arrive." Eleanor read it, her jaw tightening. "He thinks you're still 18, she said. "He thinks you'll fold." But I didn't feel 18 anymore. I felt older, sharper, every bit of me honed by loss. And as I stood at the window, snow swirling against the glass, I knew the true test hadn't even started. They would come back soon, and when they did, it wouldn't be to the house they left. I closed the curtains, sat back at the table where evidence lay in silent rows, and whispered to myself, "They'll find out what consequences look like." The night before they came home, I stood on the porch, snowflakes catching in my hair. The keypad glowed faint blue in the dark, the new code pulsing like a secret heartbeat. My breath fogged in the air as I pressed my palm flat against the cold door, steadying myself. Tomorrow, everything would shift. I told myself I was ready, but my chest thudded with a rhythm that betrayed me. Ready or not, the confrontation was coming. When the tires finally crunched up the driveway the next afternoon, I watched from the upstairs window. Suitcases bumped against legs, voices carried, laughter floated up, the kind of false cheer people wear when they think they've escaped consequences. My father strode ahead, his tan sharp against the snow, his voice booming. "All right, home sweet home." My mother followed, sunglasses perched on her head, cheeks still red from sunburn. Jacob trailed, headphones dangling, smirk already in place. And Olivia, sweet Olivia, looked smaller, her arms wrapped around herself as she trudged behind. They didn't even notice the neighbors peeking through curtains, gathering on porches. Word had spread. Springfield loved a spectacle. Mrs. Garcia had her phone angled, already recording. I held my breath. The first twist came fast. My father shoved his key into the lock, twisted, and nothing. He frowned, tried again. The keypad blinked red, shrill beeps cutting the air. He muttered, "What the hell?" My mother leaned in, tugging at the handle. "It's stuck," she said, her voice rising. He yanked harder, his face darkening. Then his fist slammed the door. The thud shook the frame. "Rosie, open this damn door right now." I pressed the button on the doorbell camera. My reflection flickered on their screen, my voice calm though my stomach churned. "The locks have been changed. You don't get to walk in anymore." My mother's head snapped toward the camera, mascara clinging to her lashes. "Rosie, sweetheart, don't be ridiculous. Let us in. We're freezing out here." Her voice wavered between pleading and sharpness, guilt wrapped in sugar. "You stole my loan," I said. Each word clipped, measured. "You drained my account. You left me with grandma while you drank cocktails. You want entry? Sign a repayment contract." Across the street, whispers rose. Phones lifted higher. The neighbors weren't just watching, they were listening. My father's face reddened, his voice booming. "This is nonsense. We're family. Family shares everything. You're overreacting." Behind him, Jacob laughed, low and mocking. "Pathetic, Rosie. You'd really lock out your own blood. Over money." That laugh, it burned more than my father's rage. All those years of me covering fees for him, slipping him cash he never repaid, and now he sneered as though I was the selfish one. My jaw clenched. I spoke slow, deliberate. "Yes. Over money. Because money is my future. And you stole it." The silence that followed stretched until Eleanor stepped forward. She leaned toward the MIC, her voice brittle but sharp, every syllable slicing the cold air. "You left me like luggage. You used her future for your fun. There will be consequences." The words landed like a hammer. My mother flinched. My father's mouth opened, then closed. Even Jacob shifted, eyes darting to the neighbors. Olivia's face turned pale, her lips pressed tight. From her porch, Mrs. Garcia muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, about time." Laughter rippled, hushed and sharp. The public shame had arrived. My mother tried again, softer now, hands fluttering. "Rosie, darling, don't make a scene. Let's talk inside, privately." I shook my head, though they couldn't see me, only the steadiness in my voice. "Privacy ended the moment you stole from me. This is where we talk. Everyone deserves to hear the truth." My father snarled, pointing at the camera. "You can't do this to us." "I already did," I said. And then, softer, "This is just the beginning." Neighbors gasped, some murmured. The scene was no longer ours alone. It was theater, the street our stage, and every eye was a witness. My parents stood there, locked out of their own kingdom, the keypad beeping red each time they tried again. The sound echoed, high and shrill, like an alarm only they couldn't silence. Finally, my father dropped his fists to his sides. His voice dropped too, gruff, resigned. "Fine. We'll talk tomorrow. At the cafe." Eleanor's eyes sparkled, though her lips stayed set. "Good," she said, loud enough for the MIC to catch. "Bring your signatures." When they shuffled away, dragging suitcases back down the drive, the whispers swelled. Phones lowered, nods exchanged. The Wilsons, the family who loved to host block parties and boast about their generosity, had been caught in their own lie. I felt the shift in the air, neighbors turning, their eyes now mirrors of my own story. Inside, I sank against the wall, my hands finally trembling. Eleanor touched my shoulder. "That was the hardest part," she said. "The first public no." But my chest knew the truth. The hardest part was still ahead. Tomorrow, in that cafe, it wouldn't just be about locks and witnesses. It would be about signatures, contracts, accountability on paper, numbers and ink against their denial. I lay awake that night, hearing the wind scratch against the windows, replaying their faces burned red in the cold. My father's rage, my mother's tears, Jacob's smirk, Olivia's silence. Each one carved itself into memory. And I knew, when I closed my eyes, I wasn't dreaming about their return anymore. I was calculating. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and coffee, the kind of sweetness that usually softened everything. But that morning it felt sharp, almost mocking. Garlands hung across the windows, tiny white lights blinked over the counter, and the hum of Christmas music floated low through the speakers. A picture of comfort, but for us, it was the battlefield. I sat at a corner table with Eleanor at my side, her cane resting against the wall, her eyes unblinking. Terry laid papers across the table like a dealer spreading cards. Beth sat near the window, her phone in hand, recording discreetly. She caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. When the bell above the door jingled, all eyes turned. My family filed in, their presence loud even before they spoke. My father, Harold, pushed forward, jaw set tight. My mother, Diane, followed, her eyes already red-rimmed, makeup smudged. Jacob swaggered behind, phone in hand, leaning against the doorframe as if the whole thing amused him. Olivia trailed last, her arms crossed tight, gaze darting between us. I felt the cafe shift, the quiet chatter dimming as people recognized faces, recognized tension. Springfield was small, and rumors had already traveled. A barista froze mid-pour. A child at the next table looked up, wide-eyed. Harold slammed his palm against the table as he Saturday. The papers jumped. His voice cut through the cafe. This is absurd. You don't drag family into public like this. Whatever this is, it ends here. Terry didn't flinch. He pushed a sheet forward, tapping the header. Repayment agreement, he said calmly. Partial repayment due immediately from your flight refunds. Monthly installments, with interest, beginning January. Failure to comply will result in legal escalation. Diane gasped, covering her mouth. Interest. Her voice cracked. You can't put interest on family, Rosalind. She turned to me, pleading. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And this is how you treat us. The words pierced, but I steadied my breath. I met her eyes. You didn't sacrifice. You stole. And this isn't about family anymore. It's about numbers. Numbers don't lie. Jacob chuckled, leaning back in his chair. God, Rosie, you sound like a damn banker. Overreacting because we took a trip. You'll get over it. Eleanor's cane tapped once against the floor, the sound sharp, commanding. She leaned forward, her voice low but carrying. She won't get over it. Neither will I. You left me behind like old luggage. You used her future for your fun. And now you'll pay for it. A hush spread across the cafe. Conversations stopped. Even the music seemed to dim. My father's face turned red, his jaw clenching. You old, he started, but Terry cut him off with a firm voice. You should know, Terry said, sliding another document across, that misuse of federal student loan funds is not just immoral. It's illegal. Reportable. Do you want the Department of Education looking into this? Do you want that kind of attention? Diane's hand trembled against her coffee cup. You wouldn't, she whispered. Beth's phone tilted slightly, still recording. I saw Diane notice, her lips tightening. She knew now this wasn't just family drama, it was evidence. Harold roared, his fist hitting the table hard enough to rattle cups. This is blackmail. No, I said quietly, though the steadiness in my voice made him falter. This is accountability. Silence pressed heavy. For a moment I thought no one would speak. Then Olivia's voice, small but clear, broke it. We stole from her. Her eyes were glassy, but her jaw was set. Sign it. Jacob snorted. Stay out of this, Liv. But she didn't look at him. She looked at me. And for the first time, I felt her on my side. The shift cracked something in Diane. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, Rosie, honey, Please. Don't do this. We'll never survive this kind of shame. I swallowed hard. 4 years, that plea would have worked. 4 years, their tears bent me back into silence. But not today. You should have thought of shame before you posted your cruise selfies while I sat in an empty house. The words landed like blows. Diane's face crumpled. Harold reached for the pen, his hand trembling with fury. Fine, he spat. I'll sign your damn papers. He scrawled his name, the ink jagged. Diane followed, her tears spotting the page. Jacob leaned back, muttering, whatever. This is a joke. But when Terry slid the page toward him, his smirk faltered. It's binding for all, Terry said evenly. No signatures, no entry. For a moment Jacob hesitated, eyes flicking to Olivia, then back to me. Finally, with a huff, he signed. Olivia picked up the pen last. Her hand shook, but she wrote her name slow and careful. Then she pushed the contract back toward Terry. Beth ended the recording with a click. The sound felt final, like a gavel striking wood. Around us, the cafe breathed again. Forks clinked, murmurs resumed, but the air had changed. People had witnessed. Neighbors, strangers, baristas, they had all seen my family bend. Shame was no longer mine to carry. Eleanor's hand found mine under the table. Her grip was firm. They think this is the end, she whispered. But this is just the beginning. I believed her. Because though their signatures inked the page, the ink wasn't the victory. The victory was the silence that followed, the moment they realized they had no more power left to take. When the cafe doors finally closed behind us, the paper still warm from their signatures, I felt a strange stillness inside. Not relief, never that, but something steadier, like a ledger balanced after years of chaos. I walked back into the cold with Eleanor beside me, her cane sinking into the snow with each step, and I realized this was the first time in my life I wasn't afraid of them anymore. At home, the contract went up on the fridge, pinned with a magnet shaped like a smiling sun. It sat exactly where their note once had, replacing mockery with proof. Every time I passed it, I stopped. The signatures were jagged, resentful, but they were there. Binding. For once, their words had weight. Of course, they didn't accept it easily. The first month, my father cursed under his breath as he slid the check across the table. This is robbery, he said, his voice low but sharp. You're draining us. His hands shook as he spoke, not from weakness but from the humiliation of being forced to pay me, his daughter, like I was some creditor. I stared at the check, the ink still drying. No, I said quietly. This is repayment. For once, the money is flowing the right direction. My mother sobbed that same night, cornering me in the hallway. Rosie, you're punishing us. Don't you see? You're turning cold. That's not who you are. Her mascara streaked down her face, and she clutched my sleeve as though guilt could soften me. I peeled her hand off, gently but firmly. This isn't punishment, Mom. This is what consequences look like. Those words became my shield. I repeated them often, to them, to myself. When their guilt pressed too close, when the old patterns whispered for me to cave, I reminded myself, love without limits had turned them into monsters. Boundaries weren't cruelty, they were survival. Jacob was slower to crack. He smirked through the first meetings, acting like the whole thing was a game. Sure, Rosie, he'd say as he scribbled a half-hearted signature on a payment receipt. Take your blood money. His laughter scraped my nerves raw. But weeks later, when he realized Eleanor wasn't bending, when he saw Olivia watching him with disappointment, the smirk faded. One evening, his voice dropped, almost swallowed by the hum of the fridge. I'm sorry, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Didn't think it would go this far. It wasn't everything, but it was something. For the first time, Jacob handed me a payment without rolling his eyes. Olivia changed most of all. Quiet at first, she became my ally in ways I hadn't expected. She checked on Eleanor, helped organize receipts, even whispered encouragement when my parents railed against me. Don't back down, she told me once, her voice trembling. If you do, they'll never stop. Her loyalty steadied me. She had been their golden child, untouched by their worst habits, But she chose truth when it mattered. That mattered more than I could ever say aloud. But the hardest transformation wasn't theirs. It was mine. One night, I stood in the kitchen long after Eleanor went to bed. The contract hung on the fridge, but my reflection glared back at me from the stainless steel door. 4 years, I had kept that joint account open, even after I knew better. I had told myself it was safer to keep peace, to avoid confrontation, than to close it. My silence had been their permission slip. I whispered to the empty room, I let them do this. It was a knife of truth I couldn't dodge. My enabling had fed their entitlement. But facing it didn't crush me. It freed me. If I had been part of the problem, I could be part of the solution. And this contract, this line in the sand, was proof of that. Eleanor noticed the shift. One morning, she placed her hand over mine as we sat with our coffee. "You're stronger than I ever was," she said softly. "I stayed silent for decades. Let them take and take. But you said no. Don't underestimate what that means." Her words felt like a legacy passing down. She had carried shame her whole life, and now she was watching me break the cycle. By spring, the payments had stacked into something real. Tuition cleared. My license was safe. The graduation ceremony loomed closer, and when I walked across that stage in my white uniform, Eleanor clapped louder than anyone, her voice rising above the crowd. I carried my diploma like a shield, proof that no matter what they had stolen, I had one. But the story didn't end there. 1 year later, the fridge still bore the contract. Half the debt had been repaid. My father worked consulting jobs he once sneered at. My mother sold antiques online, her tears less convincing with each passing month. Jacob kept quiet, steady. And Olivia, she became my shadow, my support, her own independence blooming as she realized what boundaries could mean. Eleanor moved into her own apartment nearby, her independence a mirror of mine. We visited often, her walls lined with framed photos of me in my scrubs, smiling despite everything. She told anyone who would listen, she rebuilt herself. She rebuilt us. And me. I lived differently. I no longer checked my accounts with dread. Each paycheck was mine, earned with my own hands, untouched by anyone else. Silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power, the power to choose, to draw lines, to hold steady when tears and rage tried to bend me back. The viral image came later. A screenshot from the doorbell camera, the night my parents stood locked out, sunburnt and furious, while I spoke calm through the mic. My father's face twisted in rage, my voice overlaid in bold letters, "Love without limits creates monsters." The picture spread, strangers sharing it, adding their own stories of betrayal and boundaries. For once, people didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with recognition. I learned that numbers tell stories. $9,876 stolen. $9,876 reclaimed. But beneath the math was something bigger. Silence was my calculation. Boundaries were my interest. And my life, rebuilt brick by brick, was the balance finally restored. My journey found its peace for now. But another woman like us is about to face her hardest challenges yet. Together we will continue and grow. The next story of breaking cycles and reclaiming peace is waiting for you with its own strength and battles. To listen to it, click onto the next video.